Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make garlic chili oil and give you a few tips about how to choose ingredients, especially chilies. I'll also offer some suggestions of how to use your garlic chili oil. Summertime is a great time to make something like this because you can store it in your refrigerator. And if you're using all room temperature ingredients like dry spices and oils, then you don't need to even worry about the amount of time that it'll keep in the fridge because it'll keep in the fridge for a long period of time or even at room temperature. And there are just a lot of things that you can do with it. With all of the fresh produce that's coming into season now, it can be great to put on those kinds of things to grill or to cook in other ways. You can also use it on meats if you're doing different kinds of cookouts and things like that. If you want to make the garlic chili oil, you really don't need much. Basic ingredients, some kind of neutral oil, so something like a vegetable oil or canola, sunflower, or grapeseed or avocado. I'll be using sunflower oil mostly because I am able to get that sourced locally and I have the most of that of all of my neutral oils right now. You'll probably want to avoid something like coconut oil or an olive oil for something that you want to be able to use for a lot of different things. You might find recipes that call for one of these oils for a garlic chili oil recipe, or if you know for sure you're going to always be using it with something that will be compatible with one of those oils, that's perfectly fine. But something neutral is something that can be used more generally. You'll need some kind of dried chilies, and they can be whole chilies or chili pepper flakes. And then you'll need either dried minced garlic or garlic powder. Now, as far as the chilies are concerned, you'll want to think about heat, whether you like a very mild flavor or a very hot kind of spicy flavor. So I've given you a list here of a few of the most common chilies that you can find dried, and you might even find some of these in specific chili oil and chili saucing recipes that you're looking at. So you can think about what kind of chilies you like to use based on what is available and what kind of heat level you might like. If you like things that are very mild, I recommend going for a Korean chili pepper or for ancho or Kashmiri if you're in a like an Indian grocer or an Asian grocer. Those would have potentially Korean and Kashmiri chilies, but in any grocery store you can find ancho chilies. If you get New Mexico, be careful because if it says hatch, it could be a bit hotter than a plain New Mexico chili, and Anaheim or California chilies are also pretty mild. And then as you get into hotter chilies, you can choose something like that if you would prefer. Today I will be using Chinese chilies, so those are fairly hot, a little bit less hot probably than cayenne, but still relatively hot because I like to have some heat in my chili sauces and chili oils. And then if I want even more heat when I'm cooking, I can just add some additional chilies to what I'm cooking. If you are interested in more information about chilies, there is a book that you can get from the library that has a lot of information on chilies. It'll talk more about chilies than what I'm doing in this program. I'm just giving you a basic idea of how to pick a chili pepper based on what you might want for heat level. But this book would give you a lot more information about a lot more varieties of chilies if you like to go out and look for these kinds of things. And especially if you decide to ever do this kind of recipe with fresh chilies, you'll have many other varieties. And know that when you use dried chilies, they tend to be hotter than the same variety when they're fresh. So if you're choosing fresh chilies, they will be a little bit less hot. And as I will recommend in the recipe, if you do use fresh ingredients, don't keep it in the fridge for more than a few days. Use it up quickly. So here is the recipe. As I said, you just need some neutral oil, some chilies, or either dried or whole or crushed. You'll need some garlic, and you'll need, if you'd like, some peppercorns or ground pepper. That is optional, but it will add some heat, some sharpness to your chili powder. If you do not have a food processor or spice grinder to process things that like the first step tells you, that is perfectly fine. You can actually do a garlic chili oil with whole pieces of crushed chili, but you probably don't want to do the whole chilies, and you don't necessarily want to do the whole peppercorns if you are going to skip the processing part because you don't have that. You can also crush things in a mortar with a mortar and pestle if you've got that, but it will take a little more time, and crushing whole chilies takes more time. But you could always do it that way if you want, or even just get a spoon and crush it in a bowl. But you can also just go the really easy route if you don't have something like a food processor or spice and seed grinder, and just use spices and seasonings that are already in pieces. That's perfectly fine. What happens when you process things and grind them is that more of that ingredient is exposed to whatever you're cooking it in this case oil, which means that more of its flavor is going to get released. So if you like a lot of heat, but you don't have anything to process your chilies or chili flakes with, then maybe add a little bit more chili pepper flakes. And you might even try adding just a little bit more ground pepper as well if you're doing that. But likewise, if you don't like a lot of heat and you're a little concerned, you could use your chili pepper flakes and not bother processing them. As I make a note in this chart on chilies, most of the chili pepper flakes that you're going to find in the stores is made from cayenne, which is a fairly hot chili. So it's harder to control with chili pepper flakes the heat level that you want. The best way to control it is to reduce or increase the amount of chili pepper flakes, or to choose to grind them into a powder or to leave them whole. So if you only have chili pepper flakes and you don't like too much heat, you can also skip grinding them, and you'll have less of that chili pepper exposed to the oil in the cooking process. So less of the flavor and the heat will release into that oil. So I am going to go ahead and get my dry ingredients, and I'm going to process them, and I will show you what they will look like when they've been processed until they're coarse. This is my chili peppers and my peppercorns before I process them. Stems are removed from the chili peppers. Another thing I didn't say is you can always increase the number of chilies that you would like if you are doing whole peppers. I am using more than just 3 to 4. I'm actually using a half a cup, which is about 18 to 20 of the Chinese variety of chili pepper. So you can always increase the number of chilies as well if you would like additional heat, especially if you have a very mild chili and like heat. So this is the peppers after I've processed them. You want to make sure that all of the whole chilies, if you're using any, have been completely broken up, but it's a fairly coarse kind of powder, not extremely fine. And now I can go ahead and add in the garlic powder, since that's what I'm using, or if you're using crushed garlic, that's fine too. And they'll be ready to go into the oil and cook. I'm waiting for my oil to heat up to a medium-low temperature, and then I will add the dry ingredients and just cook for 44 to 5 minutes. As I mentioned, you're welcome to use whole or fresh ingredients. Mince up some fresh garlic and mince up some fresh chili peppers, stem them and seed them. If you do that, you'll want to make sure that you use everything up within a few days, because those ingredients in general will go off a little sooner. They may last a bit longer. It depends in part on how good those ingredients were when you put them in the first place. If they were ready to go and just need to be eaten, then you probably want to use them up. But if they're going to keep a little longer because they're in perfect condition, then they might last a bit longer. But I don't want to recommend any longer than a few days because of just general health reasons. Another thing to think about is if you want to, you can do some variations either right now if you've got these other ingredients, or you can try this another time if you like this and want to try a different variation. One thing you can do is add a tablespoon of soy sauce, tamari, or liquid aminos, and during the last minute of cooking. And since those are things that you store in the fridge, once they've been opened, you'll want to store your garlic chili oil in the fridge. It will make a richer and slightly darker sauce, but it will still keep. It's still going to keep for months rather than days. You could also add just a little bit of sugar or liquid sweetener if you want to make it just a little bit sweet. This will reduce the heat a little bit and it will give it a more complex flavor. Another thing you can do is sprinkle some toasted sesame seeds in the oil once you remove it from the heat. And those will keep as well because toasted seeds keep for a long time. So in the fridge for a longer period of time would work. So while I'm waiting for my garlic chili oil to cook and for those flavors to release into the oils from the heat, just to remind you that if you are using something with all room temperature ingredients, you can store it at room temperature. But as soon as you use fresh garlic that when you mince it, it needs to go in the fridge, or chilies then that need to be in the fridge, then the whole thing needs to be in the fridge and will probably only be good for guaranteed a few days. The other thing I would say is, in general, it's good to know about oil that if the temperature in your kitchen is not stable, especially if you keep your oils near the stove and that particular area is not very stable, your best bet to prevent the oils from going off, especially if you don't use them very quickly within a few months, despite their sell by and use by dates, you're actually better off keeping them in the fridge because the temperature remains much more stable. When there's a large fluctuation in temperatures in your kitchen, that can actually make your oils go off much faster than the dates would say. So it's fine if you use oil a lot and go through it quickly, but if you're not using oil a lot, your best bet is to put it in the fridge so it will last longer. So the same is then true for your garlic chili oil. It will store perfectly well at room temperature, and if you know you're going to use it over the summer, no problem. But if you think you might want it to last into the fall, your better bet is to probably put it in the refrigerator. That's where I usually keep mine because the temperature does fluctuate in my kitchen, and it's just better off for me to keep it in the refrigerator. Most of my other oils I do not keep in the fridge because I tend to use them fairly quickly. I don't buy gigantic bottles of oils. I just buy smaller amounts and go through them in probably about 6 months. So that's okay. But anything that I know will not necessarily get used in that quick a period of time, like sesame oil, I don't use quite as much and don't go through those bottles as fast. I store those in the fridge. And one other quick note as I am waiting for my garlic chili oil to finish cooking, at medium low temperatures, you'll probably find if you stir it that it sizzles a little bit and continues to sizzle for a bit, but in general, it's not going to sizzle a lot. So if it's sizzling a lot, you've probably got it at a little bit too high a temperature. That's okay, just reduce it a bit more. So my garlic chili oil is done cooking, and you can probably hear it sizzling a bit because I stirred it, but this is what it looks like. The spices will settle to the bottom, and that's going to happen when you store it as well. So you can just stir it up when you're ready to serve it to make sure you get some of the spices on any dishes that you're serving it with. So I'm going to leave that in the pot for a couple of hours until it's cooled completely, and then I will transfer it to an airtight mason jar, and I'll just go ahead and put it in the refrigerator since the temperature in my kitchen fluctuates and I may not use all of it because I have a lot of spices and sauces and things that I use for variety. So I'll use a little bit here and there, and it might last me even through like Thanksgiving. So what are some things you can do with the garlic chili oil? You can drizzle it on your roasted and grilled meats, seafoods, and veggies. You can do this while they're cooking and let them cook that way. If you're not sure, or if you have people who might not like it and you're trying to feed a variety of people, you can also use it as a condiment and people can drizzle it on when they're ready to eat. Drizzling it on while you're cooking will obviously imbue more of the flavor into the foods, but it's still very tasty if you just drizzle it on at the end. So you can also drizzle it on salads if you'd like. You can drizzle it on fries and other potato dishes. Sweet potatoes are great because they're a little bit sweet, so adding something spicy gives you a nice complex flavor, and the different flavors enhance one another. You can also use it as a dipping sauce if you're having different kinds of summer picnics and things. Dip raw veggies in it and other foods that you might normally dip in different things. And you can use it in place of regular oil. Be careful if you've made it very hot and you're making a small amount of something. A couple of tablespoons of oil in a small amount of a rice dish, for example, can go a long way, but you could always just do a little bit of that and a little bit of regular oil as well, and then cook that the way you would normally and follow the recipe, and it will give you a more complex flavor with some heat. It's also a nice thing to do if you don't have regular chilies ready to go. You can put it on your dish as you're cooking it, either at the very end, or you can use it when you're cooking the oil. You can put it in eggs, drizzle it over them for the last couple of minutes, or you can just serve it when you're ready to eat. And it can be a condiment with a lot of different East Asian foods like fried rice, soups, and things like that. If you're looking for some ideas, you can add other spices and dried herbs to your garlic chili oil. So you can go looking for other recipes. Obviously, there are lots of recipes on the internet. If you like good old-fashioned cookbooks, I recommend a book called The Red Hot Kitchen that you can get through Cumberland County. It has not just a garlic chili oil recipe. I believe, in fact, it specifically has a Szechuan chili oil, which is going to be hotter, but it's going to have other seasonings, other spices like cinnamon, anise, and clove. So you can always use just a very mild chili with it and still get that complex flavor from the cinnamon, anise, and clove if you're interested in something like that. And there are other sauces you can use. And there's a very good recipe in that cookbook for what are called kung pao sweet potatoes that calls for a garlic chili oil. It calls for the Szechuan garlic chili oil, but you could even use this chili oil instead. It won't be quite as complex in flavor, but you're still going to get that nice blend of hot and sweet in the same recipe. So try some different things, see what you like. There are many ways that you can use garlic chili oils. I hope that something here has been helpful for you today and that you enjoy the garlic chili oil with a lot of different things.